First winner here. This is from the mind of Debo, but I agree with it 100%. Ben Johnson's playbook, because obviously now the new head coach of the Chicago Bears. We just spent a lot of time with our buddy Joe Musso, big Chicago Bears fan. He is incredibly excited about the things they are doing in Chicago. It feels like a different team ran. Colson Loveland, 10th overall pick, came back in the second round, got Luther Burden, the Missouri wide receiver, 6 feet, 200 pounds, ran sub 4.5, can play slot, can play outside. They drafted Ozzie Trapillo. His dad played in the league for a long time. The BC offensive tackle, he could kick inside. And then Shamar Turner, a defensive lineman out of Texas A&M. I thought he would be maybe third round, end up going just at the end of the second round. A fantastic pick there. But in terms of the Ben Johnson offensive mind meld with these players, how do they fit into what this offense could look like and sort of replicate what he did in Detroit?
I mean, I'm glad you said replicate, because that's what all these moves have been about, is replicating what they've done in recent years in Detroit. Because you go get your Laporta in Loveland, you get him, you knock that out, right? And then you come back and you get Luther.
Hey, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I'm going to ask you about that because you mentioned Sam Laporta a couple times. Fantastic rookie season. What are the similarities? Because it feels like Loveland isn't quite the blocker that Laporta was, or did you have concerns about Laporta's blocking ability coming out of Iowa?
No, I didn't have concerns. I didn't think he was going to be, a move furniture type of guy.
Not a George Kittle, who you know quite well.
Right, but I thought he would be a guy that will fight and strain and get in the way.
Gotcha.
Right now, I don't think Loveland is going to. I think he'll just get in the way. Right, and just hopefully stay between the defender and the ball carrier.
I didn't mean to interrupt you. I was just curious about
that. You get the tight end, right? And here's the thing about Ben Johnson's offense. Now, Laporta is a different talent, and what I mean by a different talent, like he has the unique stuff to where he can win and he can separate. But if you go back and you look at a lot of Detroit tape, it's a lot of misdirection. You get Flo going one way, he comes back the other way, and now he's getting the ball with wide open spaces, and now you can see his run after the catch ability. So those are going to be the same type of creative route set up for Colston Loveland to be a playmaker for that offense. And then you get a Luther Burden. And I'm saying that Luther Burden is going to fill the Amon-Ra St. Brown role. Right now, Amon-Ra is a little bit of a different animal. In Detroit, he plays outside, he plays inside. But when they really get funky with it on offense, he's in the slot. Or they're moving him around. They're bringing him across in motion. They're lining him up in the backfield. They're doing some misdirections, getting him screens. And if you go back and you look at Luther Burden III, he is at his best when you can get the ball in his hands quick and you can see his run to daylight ability. And I think he's going to fill that same type of role. So I love what Ryan Poles is doing to accommodate his new head coach and to make his new head coach successful out of the gate, because it started not only with the hire of Ben Johnson, but making those trades, giving up those picks to go fix the offensive line, bringing in a veteran offensive line, right? And now you have a veteran offensive line. And like you said, you get Trapillo. And now there's no pressure on Trapillo to have to perform day one.
Right.
You're bringing him in a veteran room, and now he has time to develop as these vets that they've brought in age out. You got a guy that's been in the system for a year or two, and you just plug him right in.
Yeah, and I would imagine Caleb Johnson is probably the second most excited person after Ben Johnson. Caleb Williams.
You might as well call him Caleb Johnson because it's his son. He's married to it now.
Yeah, Caleb Johnson is actually the third-round pick of the Steelers out of Iowa, and that'll be a conversation for a little later, I'm sure. Let's go to New England now because Drake May also was a big winner. Got his left tackle in Will Campbell. I love listening to Will Campbell. I could listen to Will Campbell read the phone book.
I was running.
Man, if you need to sleep, have Will Campbell, get a Will Campbell AI voice reading the phone book, and you will be out. But he is all business. He was I love the way he plays. I love his approach to football and his perspective on life. Travion Henderson, you see there in round 2. I thought he had an opportunity to go maybe even late round 1. Surprising, and we'll probably talk about this at some point in the coming weeks. Quinshon Judkins, his teammate, went before him, and that was sort of curious. Kyle Williams played outside of Washington State, but he's just a shade under 5'11", 190, and I do wonder what that looks like in terms of that wide receiver room, which is needing some talent for sure. And then Jared Wilson, my number one center coming out of Georgia. But again, I don't know how many – this team loves interior offensive linemen more than Pete Prisco does, the New England Patriots the last 3 years. That said, I love what they've done with the first 3 picks, Will Campbell, Trey Henderson, and to an extent in terms of getting dynamic down the field threat in terms of being able to separate a little bit in Kyle Williams.
Yeah, and I want to talk about the Travion Henderson pick. And I've said this. I said it on HQ, and I've said it multiple times today. This is their Kevin Falk.
That's a
This
I
is
love that.
this is their Kevin Falk, because Ramondre Stevens is going to be the bruiser, right? He's going to be the early down guy. And if you look at Trayvon's history, he shared the backfield. So now he's coming into a role that he's already similar and familiar with. And so he's going to come in this new offensive system sort of new, kind of old offensive system with Josh McDaniels, who has always had that third down back. And this is the role he's going to fill. One of the best pass protectors, if not the best pass protecting guy in this draft class. He's going to come in and fill that role. He can run routes out of the backfield, and you can still have a run game with him on either of those downs. And now with the way this new kickoff rule is set up, he could also double as your kickoff returner just to get him more touches and more opportunities to make explosive plays.
Yeah, this feels like a team going in the right direction. You obviously know Mike Vrabel really well, and it strikes me as a locker room that will be one that will be following the rules. Does that sound about right?
Oh, absolutely. And the thing is, and Vrabes' rules are really simple. It's really only 3 rules. But when you have the leader of your football team that stands in front of that room is one of the icons of the organization. He wears that red jacket, which symbolizes him being in the Patriots Hall of Fame. And he's successful. He has the rings and the hardware to show it. You have no choice but to follow him because he knows the way.
Yeah, and I'm actually bummed out. He was originally drafted 3rd-round pick by the Steelers.
Yeah.
They couldn't find a way to use him. And then, of course, Bill Belichick, and they get together in New England, and the rest is history. All right, next up, shout out to Debo for putting this rundown together, but I agree with virtually everything he has there. Look at those stupid Debo. So if you're listening, Debo thought it'd be funny to make a McLovin joke with Ryan Wilson getting arrested for having a Hawaii driver's license. I wish I was born in 1981. I'm not even going to lie about that part.
I was born in 81. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Debo. I'm glad. Thank you for at least giving me a little bit of hair and no gray in my beard.
Oh, that was when it was on its way out, buddy.
It was running like it was a bear was chasing it.
You got those McDonald's golden arches.
I'm glad this is making fun of Ryan Wilson day 2 of the draft. Thank you, Debo, for that.
This is delirium at 1:28 Eastern time.
Later in the offseason, we'll pull Debo's, because Debo used to be anchor at a small station in Pennsylvania. So we'll pull that just out of Penn State. Did you do sports, Debo, or did you do the news?
Sports.
Okay. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that tape. He looked like the actual McLovin. He's going to make fun of me. All right, let's go to Houston. CJ Stroud. They traded out of the first round. They had pick 25. They moved down from that to allow the Giants to get up and get Jackson Dart, of course, and they got a stockpile of picks in return, including pick 34, Jaden Higgins, the tall long strider out of Iowa State. He feels like a Nico Collins 2.0. And here's the thing. Like, a lot of folks I talked to in the league, and our buddy Lige were huge Jaden Higgins fans. I didn't quite like him as much, but I didn't love Nico Collins coming out. Nico Collins had a few things to prove to me, and he's one of the best young wide receivers in the league. He just got paid. You got Arante Ursary, the tackle out of Minnesota. That's right around the range. I thought he'd come out 6'6", 330, developmental in a sense, but also have a lot of faith that he can have a chance for success there. And then they get Jaden Higgins' teammate, Jalen Noel, who was at the Senior Bowl. Slot guy, return ability. He can also play outside if you want, but they have Tank Dell, who's coming off the injury. So he feels sort of like that sort of role there. And they went defense in the end of the 3rd round with Jalen Smith, a cornerback that I loved out of USC. But what are your thoughts about offensively in a post Bobby Slowick world, trying to get CJ Stroud and that offense back on track?
Yeah, I mean, they've made a big commitment in fixing the offensive line, right? CJ Stroud was sacked the 2nd most, I believe, behind Caleb Williams this year. And so that was the big difference in going from CJ's rookie year to his 2nd year, was the lack of protection, which showed in their offensive production. And so getting a big weapon, and I agree with you, and with Jaden Higgins, like, he is a big man, he is smooth, and he catches the ball, and it just gives them another big target, right? Because if you go back to what we was previously talking about with New England, it feels like all their targets are small or on the smaller side. And Houston has gone the opposite way, coincidentally, with former Patriots front office guy Nick Caserio.
Yeah, right.
But for me, like, looking at it, the Ariante Ursary, I didn't necessarily love the pick.
Okay.
And I understand that Minnesota, he ran the same wide zone system. and he comes from that. But when we're talking about athletically, right, because I do think there's some bend issues there with his game, which I think affects his overall ability to consistently anchor, and so I'm interested to see how his true fit is going to be. And if they view him as a young man, well, taking him at 48, they expect him to come in and compete to start.
Yep.
Because right now you only have Cam Robinson at left tackle, and then you have Trent Brown at right tackle. And I believe both of those guys may be on one-year deals.
And last year in the second round, they drafted Blake Fisher, Joe Alt's teammate out of Notre Dame, at right tackle. So he was okay. Like, there's room for growth there as well. So that's another two. It feels like almost like a nursery pick in that sense, that it's not a Joe Alt. They weren't picking top 5. But you're relying on your coaching staff to get the most out of these players.
Yeah, but that's why you take them, right? And that's why you take them. And I'm sure there may have been a little bit of analytics being involved in this pick. Again, speaking on Minnesota being an outside zone running team, so you have enough film seeing him run those same actions that you run and have enough belief in him. But again, Ariante is a big, massive man that will cover you up and off. And maybe that's what you need sometimes, because there have been times when we were in San Francisco where we had offensive linemen that you didn't, when we drafted Aaron Banks, a guard out of Notre Dame in the second round, I immediately got a bunch of texts saying, "Are you guys changing the scheme? He doesn't fit the scheme." Well, you know what happened? We got Aaron Banks in. We got Aaron Banks' weight down. And then Aaron Banks became a starter at left guard for us. And you never look back. And he became a really good player. And I think he just signed a free agent deal with the Green Bay Packers.
Got paid,
And so it could be, and again, I'm checking myself, it could be the similar thing where maybe you get Ariante's weight down a little bit from 330, which will allow him to move a little bit. However, I still don't think that it's going to affect his ability to bend, because I just think that's body structure.
Well, that's the good thing about having you here, because sometimes the media doesn't know the answers. At least you have the insights of having been there and had those conversations, because on the surface it may look one way, in reality maybe something else. I do want to ask you something, though, because as I look over Houston's depth chart, Tank Dell's battled injuries last year. They have Christian Kirk now. They have Braxton Berrios now. They signed Justin Watson from the Chiefs. They have John Mechie on the roster as well. We talked about Nico Collins, who they just paid, and they just drafted 2 of the Ohio State wide receivers. Iowa State. Someone's either going to have to get traded, or maybe there are plans to release some guys. Like, what's this conversation? You can't have 10 guys in the wide receiver room.
No, you can have 10 in the offseason.
Okay.
Right, you can have 10 in the offseason and carry that into the preseason, because the positions that everyone is looking for coming out from the preseason is typically tackles, it's corners, it's receivers, and sometimes linebackers in there. So those are the positions that people are most often looking for, whether you're going to claim them at the deadline, depending on where you are in the waiver claim order, or you're going to make those back-end trades, sometime player for player, or sometime for getting these late-round picks. So I like what they've done in terms of stockpiling the receiver room and creating that competition, and now it gives you the ability to gain some extra picks for next year's draft.
All right, let's talk about I have the Eagles on the list here, but we gave Debo plenty of love last night. So let's talk about the Cowboys, because the Cowboys can sometimes be, unfairly or not, a punching bag, and I think they've crushed it thus far. Tyler Booker yesterday in the first round. Then they come back with the 44th pick and get the edge rusher Donovan Ezaraku out of BC. We've talked about him maybe the growth he made as a run stopper the second half of the season. He's still undersized, more probably of a situational pass rusher early on. And then at pick 76, third round, they get Suvon Revel, the long corner out of ECU, towards ACL in September, so he hasn't played football in a while. But he feels like what used to be a Dan Quinn corner. Now, obviously, Dan Quinn's in Washington. And the grades you see if you're watching, these are our buddy Chris Rapasso's grades. Tyler Booker would have been an A+ for me. Ezaraku and Suvon Revel are both A's for me, so that works out as well. What are your thoughts about this in terms of shorting up the offensive line? Because Tyler Booker isn't it. You talk about the zone scheme guards. That's not him. And then shorten up that defense with 2 dudes, one at the first level and one at the third level.
I mean, this is clearly an A for me. It's not close. But again, and we talked about this on HQ, I don't think this has ever been the Cowboys' problem here of recent times. The draft hadn't been their problem, right? Because they know how to identify talent. And shout out to Will McClay, who's their vice president of player personnel there. This guy should be a GM for somebody because he clearly understands how to evaluate talent and build a roster, because he is a key for that front office to get the job done. So shout out to you, Will. But these players, to get a Tyler Booker, who Like he went pick 12. That is we knew he was going to be a top 15 pick.
Yep.
Donovan Ezeraku, in most mock drafts, we saw him in that 28 to 32 range.
Yep.
Right. And Suvon Revel Jr., had he been healthy, he's a top 15, top 20 pick. And you get all three of those guys within the top 76 picks of this draft. And then you mix in with Revel. He tore his ACL in September. In this day and age, I'm pretty sure he's running, he's cutting, and he may very well be ready for phase 2 of the offseason program.
Right.
Possibly. But also you have Trayvon Diggs and you have Deron Bland. And now having a player like this, and especially if he's healthy and ready to go, now you don't have to invest and go pay 18 to 20 million to Deron Bland. And it sets you up to get a compensatory pick the following year, because where Dallas has struggled, which is free agency, they don't sign players. And so now you're losing player, and you're going to be able to get them in the comp formula. So I love what they've done, and it's only going to add to that roster. And they have a talented roster. It's just keeping everybody healthy. And then, as you mentioned, January football.
Yeah, and we're not going to talk about the Ravens here right now. They've crushed it so far in this draft, but I will mention them as a team who also crushes the comp formula situation every year. Every year they have it figured out, it feels like. We'll talk about one more team before we take a break here. And there are a ton of teams. And by the way, we'll go through each one of these divisions in the coming days and weeks. So if we don't talk about your team tonight, don't fret. We'll certainly get to them. But let's go to the Seattle Seahawks. Oh, okay. All right. Debo we'll do some losers too. All right. But let's go to the Seattle Seahawks. They're a winner for me. And then we'll turn the page on some teams that maybe have disappointed us to date. So day one, they got Gray Zabel, Seattle. I get it. That makes a ton of sense. We've had them taking interior offensive linemen in some first-round mock drafts. And then on day two, they had 2 second-round picks to get Nick Emanwari, the safety out of South Carolina. I had a first-round grade on him. And then Elijah Arroyo, the tight end out of Miami. You and I saw him at Cam Ward's pro day. And while he didn't run a straight line for 40 yards, he did the pass-catching workouts with Cam, and he looked like an insanely good athlete in space. And then let's start at the last pick and work our way backwards, Ran. Pick 92, third round, Jalen Milroe, quarterback out of Alabama. Now, if I told you in September that Jalen Milroe was drafted before Shedeur Sanders, that might not have been a huge development. We probably would have thought they both would go in round one. But at the end of the third round, if I told you yesterday, at the end of the third round, Jalen Milroe is going 92, you might say, okay. And I would say Shedeur Sanders had yet to be drafted. That would have been a shocking surprise here. But just talk about the Seattle draft class as a whole, and maybe start with where Milroe is going to fit in that quarterback room that starts with Sam Darnold for now.
I mean, this is John Schneider. Obviously has his imprints all over it. Like you said, let's start backwards. Jalen Milroe, right? One of the more dynamic, we'll say dynamic athletes.
Yeah.
In this class, you talk about explosiveness, acceleration, being able to put his foot in the ground and accelerate. But then yes, he has issues throwing the ball, right? And you talked about it, just being able to layer the ball, in the intermediate areas, taking some speed off. Everything doesn't have to be a rocket ball. However, you can go through the tape and you can find some super wow throws.
The Georgia game, he's a first-round pick.
Yes, you can find some wow throws on tape, which are amazing. And I'll come back to your other question on Milroe. Then Elijah Arroyo, who this guy kind of reminds me of Jordan Reed, because I think he's gonna fill that type of role. And this is such a fit for that Kubiak Shanahan system, that move tight end, running those nakeds, running those leaks, getting those guys. And now the way the system has evolved is it puts a premium on guys who can run after the catch. And this is what Elijah Arroyo does.
Born to do.
And then your other son,
yes,
Nick Emanwari Wilson, which is, I believe, Debo, I believe this is why we're talking about him. So
Nick Wilson.
so we can talk about him. You talk about a freakish size safety that you put in this role with Julian Love, and now Mike McDonald has his Kyle Hamilton, a guy that you can put in different positions. And I know Pete Prisco feels like he's better down near the box than he is playing the post, but people felt the same way about Cam Chancellor and thought that because he was 6'4", 230 pounds, that he was just a banger. But you can go back and look at some tape. That hit that's constantly flashing on TV, where you show him getting to the red line and hitting Vernon Davis, that's because he was playing in the post.
For Vernon Davis. I recall correctly.
Say that again.
4-4 Vernon Davis.
Yes,
if I recall correctly.
4-3.
4-3, even faster as a tight end.
And so sometimes it's not about it's about your ability to anticipate and get there steps quicker than your. And so this guy already runs 4-3. So if he gets there any quicker, he's going to run himself out the screen. And then Gray Zabel just secures that offensive line, which has been a problem for them in the past. But now they're continuing to put resources in there to shore up that offensive line and protect the new quarterback they brought in Sam Darnold. So going to Jalen Milroe and his fit. Mike McDonald is a defensive coach. And so defensive coaches are always looking for mismatches and things that are going to help them. Now you have a player who you can do a multitude of things with because you have a creative offensive coordinator in Clint Kubiak. So now opposing defensive coordinators have to prepare on Wednesday and Thursday for a potential Jalen Milroe package that may or may not come to fruition.
Right.
But because he's there, because he's dynamic, and it's likely that they'll have him up as the number 2 quarterback and someone else as the 3rd quarterback.
Okay.
There will probably be a package worked in there. And so now these defensive coordinators have to stay up on Tuesday night even longer than they already are, game planning just to have a plan for when Milroe's in the game.
Yeah, and that's right. So I'm sure there's some defensive coaches around the NFC West like not super pumped about seeing that pick come across the screen.
No, not at all. And if you're sitting there in Robert Saleh and you're coming back to the NFC West, you might be scratching your head saying, "Why did I come back?"
Right.